The alarm sounded at 4:18 a.m. on a Saturday morning. A maximum security prisoner was missing from his cell during routine headcount, not in the medical wing, not in administrative segregation, not anywhere in the facility. He'd escaped during the night shift when staffing was reduced and surveillance was focused on common areas rather than individual cells. By the time the alarm activated, he had at least a 6-hour head start into the darkness beyond the prison walls. The escaped prisoner was serving 30 years for armed robbery, aggravated assault, and weapons charges. His criminal history showed escalating violence and multiple prior escapes from lower security facilities. He demonstrated ability to manipulate institutional vulnerabilities and willingness to harm anyone who interfered with his freedom. Now he was somewhere outside the prison perimeter, with night providing cover and a city providing anonymity. The prison was located 17 miles from downtown. Between the facility and the city center lay rural areas, scattered residential developments, and industrial zones. The escaped prisoner could have traveled in any direction, but experience and behavior analysis suggested he'd head toward population density where he could blend with crowds, access resources, and find transportation to leave the region entirely. U.S. Marshals received notification within minutes of the alarm. Regional Fugitive Task Force assembled at the command center. The prisoner's file was reviewed. Known associates were identified. Family connections were mapped, and probable destination analysis began. Where would a violent fugitive with no money, no vehicle, and recognizable prison clothing go at 4 a.m? The downtown bus terminal became immediate priority. The terminal operated 24 hours, serving interstate and regional routes. Thousands of passengers moved through daily. Ticketing could be done with cash. Destinations included dozens of cities across multiple states. For a fugitive needing to disappear quickly, the bus terminal offered the best combination of accessibility, anonymity, and escape routes. The terminal was 17 miles from the prison. If the escaped prisoner had traveled on foot through rural areas, he could potentially reach city outskirts by dawn. If he'd obtained a vehicle through theft or carjacking, he could already be downtown. The timeline was uncertain, but the destination was predictable. Marshals positioned units at and around the terminal immediately. Prison investigators reconstructed the escape. The prisoner had been working on his cell lock for weeks. Improvised tools created from smuggled materials. Systematic testing during night hours when guards made rounds every 2 hours. The lock had finally yielded at approximately 10:30 p.m. based on surveillance footage timestamps. He'd waited until 11:15 p.m. when the last guard check occurred, then moved. He'd navigated through service corridors using knowledge gained from work details. He'd accessed a maintenance area near the perimeter fence, using climbing techniques and tools he'd concealed previously. He'd scaled the fence at a point where surveillance cameras had a brief, blind spot. He'd dropped to the other side and disappeared into the woods beyond. The entire sequence took 9 minutes. By the time the next head count revealed his absence, he was long gone. Search teams were deployed in the rural areas surrounding the prison. K-9 units tracked his scent from the fence line through woods toward a county highway 3 miles away. The trail ended abruptly at the roadside, suggesting he'd obtained transportation. Either a vehicle had been prepositioned by an associate, or he'd hitchhiked, carjacked, or stolen a vehicle parked along the route. Vehicle theft reports were checked. Nothing in the immediate area. Carjacking reports. None filed. But a rural resident reported seeing someone walking along the highway around midnight. The description was vague: male, dark clothing, moving purposefully south. The timing matched. If he'd been walking toward the city, he'd have covered significant distance by dawn. At 6:47 a.m., 2 hours and 29 minutes after the alarm, a convenience store clerk reported a suspicious customer. A man matching the prisoner's description had purchased food, a jacket, and a baseball cap. He'd paid with cash that appeared to be old bills, crumpled and worn. He'd asked about bus schedules and directions to the terminal. The clerk hadn't recognized him as an escaped prisoner until seeing a news alert minutes after he left. The sighting was 3 miles from the bus terminal. The prisoner was confirmed to be heading toward the exact location Marshals had predicted. Units positioned around the terminal received updated alert. He was approaching on foot. He'd changed appearance with the jacket and cap. He had cash somehow, and he was actively seeking transportation out of the city. The terminal presented tactical challenges. The facility served 12,000 passengers daily, with peak activity during morning departures. Saturday morning meant families traveling, students heading to universities, and workers commuting to regional jobs. The crowds provided cover for a fugitive, but also created danger for innocent people if confrontation occurred. Terminal security was briefed. The prisoner's photo was distributed to ticket agents, security personnel, and bus drivers. Instructions were clear. Do not approach. Do not alert him to surveillance. Contact law enforcement immediately if spotted. The goal was locating him without triggering flight response that could endanger civilians. Plainclothes marshals positioned throughout the terminal. Some monitored ticketing areas. Others watched waiting zones. Several positioned near departure gates where buses loaded passengers. The coverage was comprehensive, but discreet. Passengers moved normally through the facility, unaware that dozens of law enforcement personnel were searching for a dangerous fugitive among them. At 7:33 a.m., he entered the terminal. The baseball cap was pulled low. The new jacket concealed his build, but facial recognition software flagged him within seconds of his appearance on security cameras. Marshals received immediate notification. Visual confirmation followed. He was in the main concourse moving toward the ticketing area. He approached a ticket counter. Surveillance teams watched from multiple angles. He spoke briefly with an agent and paid cash for a ticket. The transaction completed in under 2 minutes. He received his ticket and moved toward the waiting area for his assigned departure gate. The bus wasn't scheduled to leave for 38 minutes. He sat on a bench near other passengers and waited. Marshals faced a critical decision: arrest him immediately in the crowded terminal, or wait until he boarded and attempt arrest in the more confined bus environment. Both options carried risks. Terminal arrest meant potential for him to flee into crowds or take hostages among nearby passengers. Bus arrest meant confining tactical options in a vehicle with dozens of innocent travelers. The decision was made to arrest before boarding. The waiting area was monitored. When his bus was called and passengers began moving toward the gate, marshals would intercept him during the movement when crowd density would be reduced, and he'd be focused on boarding rather than surveillance. At 8:04 a.m., the boarding announcement was made. Passengers in his waiting area stood and gathered belongings. The prisoner stood as well. He picked up a small bag he'd acquired somewhere during his escape. He moved toward the gate with other passengers. Marshals positioned strategically along his route. The plan was simultaneous approach from multiple angles to overwhelm him before he could react. But he sensed something. Perhaps he saw a plainclothes marshal communicating through an earpiece. Perhaps he noticed the tactical positioning. His survival instincts, honed through years in prison and multiple escapes, triggered awareness. He stopped walking. He scanned the area. His body language changed from casual traveler to alert fugitive. Then he ran, not toward exits, toward the bus that was actively loading. He pushed past passengers in line. He reached the bus door. He climbed aboard before the driver could close it. He moved toward the back of the bus, where passengers were still settling into seats. Marshals pursued immediately. The situation had escalated from controlled arrest to active pursuit in a confined space filled with civilians. The bus driver was ordered to evacuate passengers. The front third of the bus emptied quickly, but the prisoner had reached the rear, where passenger density was highest. He'd positioned himself among travelers who now realized something dangerous was happening. Some tried to exit through the rear emergency door. Others crouched in seats. Several called 911 on cell phones. Marshals established perimeter around the bus. Negotiators attempted communication. Commands were given through the bus PA system. Exit the bus. Release the passengers. Surrender peacefully. The prisoner shouted back incoherently. He was agitated and making threats. He claimed to have a weapon, though none was visible. He demanded the bus be allowed to leave or he'd harm passengers. Tactical teams prepared for forced entry. The bus had limited exit points. Windows, front door, rear emergency door. All were monitored. Snipers positioned with angles into the bus interior through windows. The goal remained getting passengers to safety and taking the prisoner into custody without casualties. For 37 minutes, the standoff continued. Negotiators worked to de-escalate. The prisoner's demands varied. Sometimes he wanted the bus to leave. Sometimes he wanted marshals to back away. Sometimes he simply shouted about injustice and persecution. His mental state appeared unstable, which made his actions unpredictable. Then, passengers began exiting through the rear emergency door. One by one, the prisoner wasn't stopping them. He'd moved to a center seat and was watching the front of the bus where marshals were positioned. He was allowing passengers to leave through the rear, while he maintained focus on potential threats approaching from the front. Within 6 minutes, all passengers evacuated through the rear. 16 people who'd been trapped on the bus were now safe. Only the prisoner remained inside. The situation had improved dramatically. No hostages, no civilians at risk. Just one fugitive cornered in an empty bus, surrounded by law enforcement. But his isolation made him more desperate. He'd lost his leverage. The passengers who'd provided human shields were gone. He was alone against overwhelming force. The tactical calculation shifted in his mind. He couldn't escape. He couldn't negotiate from strength. His options were surrender or forcing confrontation. Marshals continued negotiation attempts, emphasizing he was surrounded. Escape was impossible. Surrender was his only option. Cooperation would be noted in his case. Resistance would add charges and years to his sentence. The arguments were practical and clear, but the prisoner wasn't responding rationally. At 9:18 a.m., tactical teams executed entry. Flashbang grenades deployed through windows to disorient. Entry through front and rear doors simultaneously. Officers moved through the bus with overwhelming speed and coordination. The prisoner was located in his seat, attempting to hide under seats and moving toward a window. He was extracted, secured, and handcuffed within 18 seconds. He fought during the arrest, but was outnumbered and outmaneuvered. Officers controlled him physically without needing significant force. He was searched thoroughly. No weapon was found despite his claims. He was injured slightly during the scuffle, but nothing requiring more than basic first aid. He was transported to federal custody while the terminal gradually returned to normal operations. The bus was processed as a crime scene. Evidence collected, damage documented. The vehicle would be out of service for days while investigation completed and repairs were made. The bus company would file insurance claims, but all passengers were safe. The fugitive was recaptured, and the terminal resumed operations by mid-morning. Investigation revealed how he'd obtained cash. He'd broken into a rural home during his escape. The residents were away for the weekend. He'd stolen cash from a drawer, taken food from the refrigerator, and changed into civilian clothes left in a bedroom. The burglary wasn't discovered until Sunday when the residents returned. By then, the connection to the prison escape was already established through evidence he'd left behind. The terminal manager reviewed security protocols. The prisoner had entered and moved through the facility without triggering immediate alerts, despite active warrant information. Improvements were needed in real-time facial recognition systems and coordination between terminal security and law enforcement. The response had been effective once he was identified, but earlier detection could have prevented the bus standoff entirely. Passengers who'd been on the bus received counseling and support. The experience was traumatic. A routine bus trip had become a hostage situation. Children had been present. Elderly passengers had been terrified. Everyone had feared violence that fortunately never materialized. Victim assistance programs provided resources for anyone experiencing ongoing anxiety or trauma. The bus driver was commended for following protocols during the crisis. He'd evacuated passengers when ordered. He'd maintained communication with law enforcement. He'd avoided actions that might have escalated the situation. His professional response had contributed to the successful outcome. The prisoner faced additional federal charges beyond his original conviction: escape from federal custody, burglary during flight, false imprisonment for the bus incident, making terroristic threats, resisting arrest. Each charge added years to his sentence. The escape attempt had cost him any possibility of early release and guaranteed he'd spend decades more in federal prison under maximum security. The prison where he'd escaped implemented security improvements. The cell lock vulnerability he'd exploited was corrected across all units. Work detail supervision was enhanced. Perimeter surveillance was upgraded. Staff training addressed the manipulation tactics he'd used to acquire smuggling assistance. Every failure point in the escape was analyzed and corrected. For the 12,000 people who used the bus terminal that day, most were unaware of how close they'd come to a dangerous situation. Morning departures were delayed slightly. Some routes were temporarily suspended, but the terminal never closed and operations continued throughout the crisis. The professional response ensured public safety while minimizing disruption. Law enforcement analyzed the operation for training purposes. The prediction that he'd target the bus terminal proved accurate. The positioning of units prevented his escape attempt. The bus standoff was handled with minimal force and no casualties. The coordination between agencies was seamless, but the case also showed how quickly situations could escalate in public transportation facilities where crowds provided both cover and complication. The rural homeowner whose property was burglarized during the escape felt violated and frightened. His home had been invaded. his possessions used by a violent criminal. His sense of security was damaged, though property was recovered and damage was minimal. The psychological impact persisted. He became vocal advocate for stronger prison security and harsher penalties for escape attempts. For U.S. Marshals who tracked and captured the prisoner, the operation represented textbook fugitive pursuit, behavioral prediction, strategic positioning, patient surveillance, controlled confrontation. The outcome was optimal given the circumstances. A dangerous fugitive was returned to custody. No one was seriously injured. Public safety was maintained. The system had functioned as designed. The prisoner spent his first weeks back in custody under the strictest security measures: administrative segregation, constant surveillance, psychological evaluation. He would eventually be transferred to a supermax facility where his opportunities for future escape would be virtually eliminated. His career as an escape artist was finished. The bus company reviewed their security protocols. Drivers received additional training on recognizing suspicious passengers and responding to law enforcement operations. Vehicles were equipped with upgraded communication systems for emergency situations. The lessons from the incident would improve safety across the entire regional bus network. Terminal security personnel received commendations for their role in the operation, their quick distribution of the fugitive's photo, their discreet surveillance, their assistance in evacuating the bus, their coordination with law enforcement. Every action had contributed to the successful outcome without creating panic among thousands of other passengers. Media coverage focused on the dramatic bus standoff. News helicopters captured footage of the tactical response. Reporters interviewed passengers who'd been on the bus. The story dominated local news for days. But beneath the dramatic elements was a more important narrative about coordination, professionalism, and protection of public safety in vulnerable transportation facilities. 4 behavioral analysts who studied the case, the prisoner's decision-making revealed patterns common to repeat escapees: the focus on transportation hubs, the acquisition of cash and civilian clothing, the attempt to blend with crowds, the escalation when cornered. Understanding these patterns improved law enforcement ability to predict fugitive behavior and position resources effectively. The 17-mile distance between the prison and the bus terminal had represented the prisoner's window of opportunity. That distance was far enough to make immediate recapture difficult, but close enough to be traversable on foot if necessary. The geography had enabled his escape attempt, but also constrained his options, ultimately leading him to the exact location where marshals had positioned to intercept him. For 6 hours and 43 minutes, he'd been free. From the moment he'd climbed the prison fence until tactical teams pulled him from the bus, he'd experienced liberty that would now cost him decades of additional imprisonment. The brief taste of freedom became the justification for ensuring he'd never have another opportunity to escape. The bus that had been at the center of the standoff was eventually returned to service, repaired, cleaned, recertified for passenger transport. It resumed its route without incident. Passengers who boarded weeks later had no idea they were traveling in a vehicle that had been a federal crime scene. The dramatic moment passed into history while the bus continued its mundane work, moving people between cities. For the thousands of families and individuals who used the terminal that Saturday, it was simply a travel day. Some experienced slight delays. Others noticed increased police presence. Most completed their journeys without awareness of the manhunt occurring around them. Their safety had been protected by personnel operating invisibly in service of public security. The prisoner's original victims were notified of his recapture. For them, his escape had been terrifying. Knowing he was free had created fear. He might seek revenge. His recapture restored some sense of security, though trust in the system had been damaged. The escape had proven that even maximum security facilities weren't completely secure. That reality would persist long after he was returned to custody. His escape also reignited debates about prison security funding. The facility was understaffed and relied on aging infrastructure. Budget constraints had prevented recommended security upgrades. Guards worked overtime regularly due to staffing shortages. The escape could have been prevented with better funding, better equipment, and better staffing levels. Politicians promised improvements, but implementation would take time and resources that weren't immediately available. For one Saturday morning, a major interstate bus terminal had been the endpoint of a prison escape and the scene of a tense standoff. Thousands of travelers moved through the facility, while law enforcement worked to locate and capture a violent fugitive before he could disappear into the transportation network. The operation succeeded because of prediction, coordination, and professional execution. And on Monday morning, the terminal returned to normal operations, processing passengers who would never know how close their Saturday had come to tragedy.